everyone, and welcome to Call Your Hits, a Storm Riders Airsoft podcast. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Today, I've got Chaz in the studio with me, or the virtual studio, I should say. It's been a while. We've been wanting to get Chaz on for a little while, schedules and all this kind of stuff, but I'm so glad to have him on today. For those of you who don't know, Chaz is our Discord moderator. Chaz is actually in Colorado. We've never met in person. We only met through the Discord. We've been very, very fortunate to get to know each other over the last several months. Chaz has been playing Airsoft a really long time. He has a tremendous breadth of experience, both in like just Milsim Light. I'll let him introduce himself on that front, but also a lot of experience with gun teching in a way that's sort of different than, for example, Pat's experience, in that it's a lot more volume. And a lot of different experiences working with different clients and stuff like that. So today I thought we'd have a bit of a discussion, a bit of a hodgepodge discussion about the different stuff that Chaz is up to, what Airsoft is like in Colorado, and sort of all points in between. So Chaz, thanks so much for joining us today. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Well, thanks for having me. This is going to be fun.
Yeah. So Colorado, like the first thing I think about when I think about Colorado is mountains, right? And the first, like when we first started talking, like months and months ago, I was like, I play Airsoft at sea level, like 0 meters, and like it's between 0 meters and like let's call it like 30 meters. I don't know, like 100 feet, like very, very close to sea level. But
so
I hear a lot about
level.
like, yeah, exactly, yeah. And I hear a lot about like high altitude stuff. So I'm curious, like, what is Airsoft like in Colorado? How does the altitude affect how you play? All that kind of stuff. Like, just lay it on me.
Well, being born here and raised here, I've never moved away. I've born and raised. So, it to me, it doesn't. I don't know any different now. If you were to take me up to 13,000 feet, and there's plenty of places in Colorado where you can drive right up there to do that, I start to get a headache. Somewhere around 13,000 feet, that starts to bother me. But generally, most, when you go skiing, most of the ski resorts, their base elevation is 9,000 feet. But they'll, some of those lifts will take you up there. And that's where I start to have a problem is somewhere north of 11,000 feet. We have a road, I-70, that goes through the mountains. And there's a sign right there, and you're just a tick over 11,000 feet as you drive through this almost mile-long tunnel going straight through the heart of the Continental Divide. So, yeah, playing Airsoft here is different in some regards. You do get winded quickly, though. You're not going to sit there and run forever, but generally it's, if you're used to it, you're used to it. I've seen people come up from lower elevations and play, and you can see it in them. They start sweating. That's the other. There's a couple of factors for Colorado. Of course, the altitude. Here in Denver, or basically here at my house, I'm just a tick over 6,000 feet. So
that's crazy.
Higher than Denver at 5,280 feet. And the other thing is how dry it is here. And so the combination of how dry it is and the altitude oftentimes really affects people badly. So the mantra is, oh, you've got a headache, drink water. Oh, I didn't sleep so well last night, drink water. Drink water. Just keep drinking water. And that's the best way to overcome a lot of those issues that people have, because it's insanely dry here and people just don't realize it. And then they start licking their lips and their skin is dry and their hair that's normally curly is all flat. And the wintertime is the driest. We get monsoonal flow from coming up from Mexico and over, Arizona and I should say monsoonal flow coming up from Mexico over New Mexico and Arizona and into Colorado. And we get some good rainstorms, so it's a little bit more humid in the summer.
It's crazy to me, like just being able to think about taking a road to like 11,000 feet. Like there are interprovincial flights in our province in Newfoundland that don't even go that high. Like you can basically fly across the province and you never like go north of like
Yeah.
9,000 feet. Like it's crazy.
You have people that fly into the mountains up here in small airplanes. It's like planes go down all the time because
That's
they just
that's
don't
crazy.
understand. It's like, oh, I'm just going to fly around the north side of this mountain.
So if you guys host MILSIMs or like larger events in Colorado, because you mentioned like people come to Colorado to to play airsoft just like they do everything else, but is that a factor for a lot of people for the games that you have? Like, is it mostly people from Colorado playing Colorado games? Do you get people from other states coming in?
So the regional events that we've done and had, I've seen people as far away as Texas, and a good portion. The ground rolls off pretty quickly as soon as you start to leave Colorado. Driving east, uh, crossing into Kansas, you're roughly at 3,000 feet and going down. So same effect going through New Mexico. You go over the last set of mountains, and then you just start dropping off as you go into from Mexico into or New Mexico into Texas, and but people like to come down from Wyoming as well, and the elevation there is still pretty high, and so I don't see there's much of an effect on those people. But it's the people that have come from California that have the worst, and I've seen that. I got to play a game, fall of when was it? Fall of 2020. It was a while ago now, I guess. Um, and Jet the Desert Fox came out, and he
Hmm.
did a video on it. You can search it, and he played this game called Jackal, and I forget the number of it, but we had a good time, and I had a chance to actually. We got wiped out. We were the third faction, a very small group, maybe 15 of us between two teams of well over 200 players each. And our job was just we were an admin role to effect things to happen on the field to cause, each team to go for. We were supposed to be in a certain spot, and then both teams would try to fight for it. And of course, anyone that came near us, we would try to fight them off. But our role was to eventually die,
Yeah.
but give up a good battle first, and then cause havoc where we saw a need to do that. But talking to Jet, just I'm dead. They're rifling our truck, looking for things that were game parts to take. And I was just talking to him, took a selfie with him, but and just asked him, I said, "How you doing? Have you been drinking enough water?" And he goes like, "Yeah, it's pretty hot here and it's really dry." And I was like, "Well, just keep drinking more water than you think you should." Uh, and he said he was having a hard time running a little bit. But he's a young guy and he quickly recovers. And I think that's the thing a lot of people don't realize is, youth can get away. You can get away with a lot more being so young.
Yeah,
So
being on the later half of my 30s, I'm starting to really recognize that. I've talked about that in the podcast before, but it's like, and Pat as well, like, you're not doing things that we used to do because we don't get away with them anymore. So that's legit. So
yeah.
you talked about like regional games. Tell us a little bit about some of the like the bigger ops or I guess milsims or milsim lights, let's call them, that you may have attended over the years. I know you went to one. Was it in New Mexico last fall or last
Yeah.
summer?
Yeah, that was American Milsims Copperhead 6.
Okay, yep.
And that's they're up there, Milsim West and American Milsim kind of are the two really big names in airsoft in the United States. Milsim West is very like 48 straight hour event. Like you ruck in everything. So your gear is radically different than what you would do for American Milsim, which, at a certain point in the evening, they had, they kind of stop the game, allow people to refit for a night game if you're going to do the night game. And there's no requirement to do the night game, or you just go get dinner and call it a night, and then rejoin again in the morning. So it's a little bit more laid back, but Milsim West is definitely a tough game. Don't know if I could pull that one off anymore. I think maybe 10 years ago I could have. So if you're going to do a Milsim West game, I think you do it younger than
Yeah,
where I,
sleeping on the ground. I think we actually talked about this. Like sleeping on the ground at some point sort of loses its appeal.
yeah, I think I'm just too old now to sleep on the ground. I prefer even a crappy hotel mattress.
So what was Copperhead like? Is it like a just like a force on force kind of deal, or like how's that structured?
AMS, they have they have cost, and then they have USF. I think the bad guys, the other guys
Okay.
that they wear tan and multicam and stuff like that. I choose to play on cost side, and that's the green, whatnot like that colors. Nobody can wear black, and your helmet has to match your camo color, because they say that often, and it's true. Oftentimes, you're peeking out a window, and all anyone can see is your helmet, or your head covering,
Hmm.
and that's how they'll identify you, and that's fair. That's a good rule. So no black, and because oftentimes black camouflage is thrown in with green in a lot of games here in the U.S. that I've
Yeah.
noticed, except for they have two other factions that they sometimes allow to play. Sierra Dynamics, which is a private military contractor group, and they're I don't believe they're as large of a group as either Cost or USF, but they get to wear their team colors are black, gray, and multicam black are the three that they're allowed to use. And they don't always allow that team, to play. And the other one is La Losa. I believe I'm saying that right, but they're a kind of a drug cartel faction, and their team they're not. I don't believe they're allowed any camos. It's more like
Hawaiian shirts, flannel shirts, like that kind of stuff.
yeah, not even flannel. More it's more Hispanic inspired kind of wear.
Okay.
And I've never seen it actually. Never been at a game where it was played, where that faction played. I think it would be interesting, but who knows? Haven't been to one of those games yet.
So is it like they dream up a scenario or come up with a scenario or whatever, and then the factions are basically given free reign to just accomplish whatever their overall objective is for the day? Or is it more a little bit more like what Sam was telling us about his experience with Milsim, where like the commanders are also working with like the game control to make sure everything is working
Yes,
throughout the
this
day?
is so the game that Sam was referring to, Broken Home 10,
Hmm.
and I was supposed to go to that one, but just couldn't stretch it, financially. It just wasn't going to happen. But yeah, it's the same structure. So it
Okay.
was cost versus UFS or USF. I just don't know which way they say that. I'd have to look it up. Sorry, but yeah. So that's the scenario and the backstory, the lore of it is kind of all out there, and how the United States got fractured into two different countries is kind of the way that goes from what I've read. And it's all out there on their website, easily readable. But from a squad perspective, you do what your commander. So we have squad leaders, and they report to the next level up, and platoon, and then all the way up to the commander, and they set the objectives early on at the top, and then they filter it down. And let's say you're out the initial, like at Copperhead. So the initial push was, we want to get to Yellow Street. And this was played at a place called Playas Training Center in Playas, New Mexico. And it's basically what's left of a failed town. It's just all these houses on these streets. It's being taken back by the environment. Windows are broken and some are pretty beaten down. The funny thing is there's a small group of houses that are still maintained and people live in them. I think that's the staff that it's a training center. Military units go in there and do exactly what we did. House to house fighting. The houses are pretty spread across the desert environment. They're not close to each other, so you need a rifle that has some decent range. But there are times when you get up on a building and it's CQB. It's in a house. You're going in through a window, or you think you've got a door covered and there's nobody in that room, and then all of a sudden somebody on the other side of that door opens it up and shoots you through the window, and from 12 feet away.
Wow.
So it was pretty weird, and then just the copious use of grenades. Like, I don't think I've ever been blown up that many times playing airsoft.
Those are the pyro grenades too, right?
Yeah, so the EG-67s and then the Taggin 67. So they're based on the size of an M67, basically a ball of a grenade. And they expel BBs. They expel a loud sound and kind of a noxious smell. The EG-67s from Enola Gay, I feel like are more suitable use. The Taggins are over the top aggressive.
And so for those types of events, like I think I may have seen a video actually. I think of maybe it was Milspec Mojo and Travis Haley. They were at Copperhead or something like that.
Yeah.
So like those are like hundreds and hundreds of players, right?
Yeah, very large. I think they were limited to like 350 players per side at Copperhead 6.
Wow.
And they filled them. They sold all the tickets.
So is that typical for the games that you're attending, like in your areas?
Well, I'm going to say those are national level games because you're having to travel to go do those games. They don't ever hold those. I haven't seen one yet held in Colorado. We have sites that would support it. It's just, they like to go to the mount sites, things where there's buildings to go in and out of. The Guardian Center down in Perry, Georgia. That's specifically built, or it's converted buildings to turn into a mount site. They even took a defunct. What are those things? A C-130, transport aircraft, and they put it out in the woods. They were bringing it in last year for last year's Iron Horse, but they just couldn't get it done in time. And that's the next big game that I'm going to be going to is Iron Horse out in Perry, Georgia.
Right, and you're going with your team
April.
for that one, right?
Yes. But they've got so they opened the field up even wider. They opened up a whole new wooded area with a downed C-130 transport plane, which is pretty cool. That's going to be fun. But the interior of it,
those are still the big transport planes in Canada. PS, like those are the ones we see flying all the time overhead.
I live near an Air Force base, and there's plenty of those coming in and out, but they're being replaced with the larger jet powered ones. But yeah.
So you're going up with your team. How many people are on your team? Tell us a little bit about that. I guess your team just in general.
That's a good question. And I would have to look at the roster.
Are you talking to is it like 5 or 6 people? Or is it a dozen people? Like just ballpark?
At its biggest, we were 15.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's a good size.
So, but it comes and goes. And we've had, one of our players, and he's still on our team, and he lives in Canada now. But people kind of come and go, and, people's interests kind of ebb and wane, from doing airsoft. But I think we're probably, I know we've got 5. We held a meeting today via our own team Discord, and there were 5 of us in it. And those are 5 people that each have tickets that have spent the money, $270 for that ticket.
Wow.
Yeah, to go. And, we were talking stuff about, the transport, how are we getting there? Because that's a 20-hour drive one way from Denver to Perry, Georgia. But I think there's probably 8 of us on our team.
So just back up for a second. $270. That's the entry fee for that event?
Yeah, that's just to play in
Per
that
person?
game. Per person.
Holy crap.
Yeah, when you stop to think about it. And there's the one fellow on our team is kind of our leader, Ryan. He was saying, so all the tickets for cost have sold out. 200 tickets sold out in probably less than 3 hours. Maybe not even that long. So that's just the first wave. He said that they were going to be releasing possibly 2 more waves of 100 tickets each. So another 100 players on cost and another 100 players on UFS. And then somebody was saying that it was possibly going to be 700. So maybe there's another 50 players per side. So that's going to be a big, big game. But this is a huge facility. They've got like underground. It's not underground. They just put it inside of a very long building they built, steel building. And it's a wrecked subway is what it's supposed to, they've got subway trains in there that are just like scattered about and, knocked over on their side. They've got another one where it's like a tunnel when they've got cars all through it. And so it's for military units, first responders, people like that to go in and train. And it's supposed to be a pretty amazing place. Ryan, our squad leader, went last year, and he said it was just amazing to play.
That sounds crazy. Just thinking about the cost, like I think I need to be charging more for the games that I run. Clearly, 'cause that's crazy.
Well, I couldn't imagine what it would cost to rent, the Guardian Center for a weekend. I got no clue what that would cost. Obviously, they have to charge that much just to cover that, and so they can make a profit at some point. But yeah.
That's so funny. Like, well, it's not funny is the wrong word, but like when we started with the Discord, I kept seeing this come up multiple times. People were like, "Oh, well, I can only afford to go to X number of MILSIMs a year or whatever." And in my mind, I was just thinking the travel costs, because traveling from Newfoundland is obviously very expensive. Traveling anywhere in Canada really is not super cheap, and I'm assuming it's the same in the United States. Like, yeah, you can drive, but gas costs money. You can take the train or whatever, but actually the ticket of the event is never something that I really factored. Like for us, like a game is like, I don't know, $50, right? Like a big like scenario game, like you play all day or, play for a weekend. It's like $100. Like it's not a big deal, right? That's 100 Canadian dollars PS, right? For you guys, that's like, I don't know, $70 or $60
70,
or something,
75, something like that. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I've played in some regional games that they charge $75 for an entrance. I mean, the last one I did, that was a $75 entrance fee. That was a 2-day event. It was kind of based on the same kind of ideas that you see at American Milsim. 2 main factions, a third faction just thrown in for a little bit of fun and some admin reasons. But there's a difference that, those were mostly local players that are coming, whereas this is a national event. They've got a really large presence out there. And, I was just happy that we got tickets within the first few minutes of being able to buy tickets. So to go to Iron Horse, yeah.
So how do you organize yourselves as a team? Because you're talking about like you had a team meeting, and I don't mean like logistically, like that's certainly one thing, but like so you're going to this really big event that has a lot of stuff going on that is, let's call it above your pay grade in terms of what you're doing on the field. Like there's strategy and stuff that you're likely, unless you're an organizer, you're not privy to or whatever. So how do you organize and how do you prep for that as a team?
Well, we try to follow a set. Let me back up. So several of our team members are former Marines,
You don't hold
Dan
that against them though,
and
right?
Steve. No, no, no. But it's helpful because they oftentimes will, it's like, okay, well, this is kind of what, what happens in the real military. They don't ever hold it over anyone's head or anything like that. Nicest guys you'd ever want to meet. But they give some insight to those of us that have never served. And Ryan, our squad leader, he, he gets his direction from his next superior at these events. And it can be as simple as, okay, we need this squad and this squad to go to Yellow Street or whatever the designation is. And I'm referring to Copperhead for this, but there was a main street, Yellow Street, and it kind of ran right through the middle of the map. And we wanted that street to try to take control of as much of the map as we could. And that's where most of the action was for 2 days straight, was fighting between building to building. And my hope was that we eventually could find our way into the marketplace, which was even wilder. That's real tight, kind of mud huts in a way, kind of building with these mud walls that were separating houses sometimes. But we got to the edge of it and I never got to go in. Never saw it. I wish I had seen it, but the map was pretty large. And I was fine with what we did. We had a fun time fighting from house to house, throwing grenades in a house and blowing up 8 dudes. They all pull their dead rags and walk out because there's no one that's coming to revive them. So just save it and walk back to your spawn and
Right.
start again.
Yeah, and so like when you're like, I think there's this sort of preconceived notion amongst a lot of players who have not really organized stuff, or been privy to that organization, that like it's this super tactical, like, all right, we gotta get like squad names and numbers and like role assignments and all this kind of stuff. And my expectation is that in reality, that's not really how you get organized, right?
No, I've never had a call sign. Nobody has ever given me one. And that's the thing, is I don't
That
think
you're
you
aware
can,
of.
Well, yeah, that's true. No one's ever said it to my face. Let's put it that way. But yeah, I think that's something that you have to earn, and is given to you by your teammates or friends. But anyhow, I just find it easier just to use people's names because, I'm not going to call out somebody's call sign and they're going to be like, what? Because, when we all go to work, nobody calls you by a call sign. They call you, hey, Dave, come on over here and give me a hand,
Yeah.
Or, hey, Ryan, I need some suppressive fire put on that window. And that works really well. We wear radios, so we can talk, because sometimes half the squad could be on one side of a building, the other half could be just, maybe around the corner, but on the other side of the building, and screaming. Nobody wants to scream that loud. And guess what? The enemy can hear that. So radios are used. We follow the lead of our squad leader because he's got a radio that is talking directly to his superior. At Copperhead, I wore 2 radios, and I also had that. In case Ryan went down, I guess I was the next in line. And I had a radio to our superior, and we would just get orders. Okay, go. And, we would say, okay, fine. We've taken building 13 on Yellow Street. What do you want done? It's like, hold that for now. We're sending in, another squad to come around the other side. And so there's some coordination like that. But at a certain point, it's like, we know what the objective is that they wanted. They told us, we want this street. So, we don't tell them every time when we go from building 3 to building 5, we don't tell them about that. We just do it. And it's kind of the same thing. I think everyone's aware of what the idea is. And so we all just work towards that end.
Yeah, it's that concept. I don't know if I've mentioned it in the podcast before, but I certainly talked about it around, well, what is the commander's intent, right? What are you trying to achieve? And you just let your people do what they're going to do because you can't micromanage. You're not there. right?
Yeah.
It's like, just, I want to, take Yellow Street. I want to take this objective. I want to do this, that, the other thing. What I would like you to do is go do that thing. You guys figure out how you're going to do that, right? And if you need help from me through more people moving stuff around or whatever, like, that's how you make it happen. And I guess my point in bringing this up, and as we were talking before, like, you can't prep for any of that stuff at the squad level. Like, you can prep your guys to go in and make sure everything is working, and get your guns all up and running and all that kind of stuff. But you can't, like, you're like, oh yeah, well, here's what we're going to do that day, because you don't know, right? You don't know till you get your sort of quote unquote marching orders, right?
Absolutely. No, you just make sure all your gear is in, ready to go. Your gun is ready to go. You're going to go trade BBs with another, team.
Yeah.
Basically, that's all I know. So you got to make sure that your gun is in top shape, that your gear is checked out, that you've put it on, a few times before you're actually going to use it. I would never tell somebody to go buy a brand new plate carrier and then go play a big game. You need to get that thing broken in. You need to understand, when you go to reach for a mag and you don't have to look at where you're reaching for it.
Yeah.
Then you've worn it enough. You just got to be ready for everything that's possible. And then try to do your research. I'm going to look at all sorts of maps and pictures and everything I can about the Guardian Center. I did the same thing for Copperhead. I looked at satellite photos of Playas, New Mexico, and that failed, like, residential neighborhood. But just understand what the distances are between buildings, what the cover looks like, for that time of year, what the weather's going to be like, because I'm responsible for me. I will bring a couple extra mags because somebody's always going to lose a mag, and at American Milsim games, you can only have 7 mags on you. So choose your mags, and no high caps. They all have to be mid caps. So choose your mags well. Choose your gun well. Are you going to take an M4 and you can get 190, 250 round mid caps for, or you can take an MP5 which carries 90. I would rather have the M4.
You know which one I would pick. In fact, like 7 mags is nowhere near enough, but that's a conversation for a different podcast.
I would love to see you at one of these games, Phil.
Well, yeah, and you know what? I think part of it too is everybody else is limited in the same way. So, for a while, like when I was starting to play airsoft and like taking it a bit more seriously, one of the things I started doing was reel capping all my mags. I'm like, I want to reel cap my mags. And I stopped doing that because, not just because I shoot a tremendous amount, because at the time that was not necessarily who I was. I hadn't evolved that particular trait yet. But it was because everyone was still rocking like high caps or otherwise. So I'm reloading my mags all the time. I'm always at a disadvantage. So why would I ever do that? And I think if we're like, oh yeah, so everyone is having 7 mags. Everyone is going to have mags that are 150, 200 rounds or whatever. Everyone is limited in the same way. Would I shoot as much as I do now? No. Would I shoot still a lot? I mean, you can't untrain that. Like my trigger finger just goes. I don't know what to tell you. But I think there's something to be said there about, like how we were talking with Glick the other day, like, if you have an LMG, you're the only one you can use full auto. You're the only one. When that playing field is leveled out, it gives you a reason to pay attention to other stuff. Is where I'm getting at with that.
Yeah.
But you touched on something interesting, and we talked a little bit about this with Sam when he was on. But why don't you talk to us a little bit about, like, what do you do to get your guns in particular in a position that you're comfortable with them going into the Milsim? Because I think I've seen that all the time, like, and it's happened to me. You should show up to the field, your airsoft gun, you're like, yeah, let's do this, and you pull the trigger twice, and it just, to use the vernacular, it shits the bed, right?
Yeah.
So
that is the worst feeling, especially maybe you've spent 5-6 hours messing with it, maybe all at once or maybe over a couple days, but you've spent some time dealing with this, and it works. and you're testing, you've worked it, you've taken it out somewhere where you can shoot it, for distance, and it works. And then you take it to the game and it decides not to. And it is the most frustrating thing ever. But guess what? That's airsoft. That's airsoft teching. That is just, sometimes I think it's more alchemy than it is science, more a craft or an art form. But, there's definitely a lot of knowledge that goes into teching. But yeah, so for big games like that, though, I bring 3 guns. Like 2 of them may not ever see the light of day. But I will, same for Iron Horse, I will bring 3 guns. This time it will be 2 smaller M4s, an SR-16 E3 that I have that I took to Copperhead, and I used it on Saturday and it absolutely destroyed people. It's a short little gun, but it has massive range. I was shooting people behind, they were not directly behind the house, but basically at that distance from the corner of another house. And if you ever look at that map, it's like, that's easily 200-ish feet, for sure. And I was, hitting these people with 3 and 5, BBs, and then they would call their hits. But they were just shocked. But the problem with that is that they were so far away that I couldn't get there to pull their dead cards, to pull, to pull any intel that they might have had on them. So you have to be careful with that, shooting them from too far away, because they'll just get medicked and then they're up again. But that was a great little gun, and for some bizarre reason, I decided, I was like, I got to rock my Mark 18 on Sunday, and it was like it didn't want to work as well, and I had changed the sight and did all the prep on it in the morning, and I don't know why I did that. So
what does your routine like leading up to it? Like when you're doing that teching, like are you working on your guns like the week before, or do you want everything sort of squared away like a month before?
At least a couple weeks ahead of time, I want them, and then I don't touch them. I will do, like the day before I leave, I will definitely test them, load up a mag, fire it, chrono test it, and then range test it, and then not touch it, put it in a bag, clean the barrel one last time, and put it in a bag, and away we go.
Yeah, I mean that's interesting. And so like, what about like the rest of your kit? Like, do you? I remember you posted a picture, I think, of a Pelican case maybe that you were loading up for the game.
Yeah.
So like, how much other kit are you taking with you on top of your guns?
Well, of course, kind of it's funny. It's not too dissimilar from just going to a Saturday pickup game. The things that you would normally wear, but it's not just me. It's kind of a team loadout. Kind of, what do you want to emulate? Because a lot of times it's kind of fun to do that with your team at these events. We're getting to that stage, where we're not all just wearing, it's like, I just wore a plaid shirt today. It's more than just a Saturday pickup game. So we're coordinating. What do we want to do? And for this game coming up, we're thinking a MARSOC loadout. But then it's like, I don't like the idea of those big heavy duty plate carriers that those guys wear. And especially the older stuff. One of our teammates, Steve, combat photog, stories that he tells are just amazing what he's seen and what he's had to do. But he was back, in those days in Iraq and later, and then Afghanistan, where they were wearing some of that older stuff. And I'm more of when it comes to plate carriers, I like a JPC. I like smaller things. And anymore, much like you, and I know we've talked about this, is I've been transitioning to chest rigs. Just lighter is better. But we kind of want to, as a team, we want to emulate this group. And luckily, the group that we want to emulate, according to Steve, is like, oh, those guys wore whatever they had. So they weren't always matchy. There were some guys that were like, oh, okay, that's what they sent you with. So me wearing a JPC plate carrier and somebody else wearing an older, heavier duty style rig, is completely fine. But
Yeah, it won't look out of place. Yeah.
no, but we all have decided as a team, it's like, okay, we're going to go with a tan based plate carrier, because in the rule sets, our camo has to be green or a green base. So we'll have M81 pants, and nobody wants to wear an M81 top because Georgia in April is going to be roughly 75 degrees, but also 75% humidity. So for us dry state Coloradans, we're going to be dying. And,
Yeah,
it's
you'll be
like
sweating through your combats.
exactly. Nobody wants that. And so then Steve brought up the idea of, hey, what about this CIA? Because there's been many occasions where CIA elements have been put in with MARSOC units. So then we start searching, what does a CIA loadout look like? Well, of course, there are no photographs. There are very few photographs out there of these guys. And the funny thing is, we finally found a couple, and somebody put it up on our team Discord, and I was like, that looks like a regular day at a pickup game for airsoft. Like this mismatched group of 8 dudes, they're all smiling and they've all got different guns and they've all got different plate carriers and they're all wearing different shirts, except the one element that I saw in every photograph was these they look like fishing vests, but they were these tan vests that many of the people in these photos were wearing. I was like, we got to get some of those tan fishing vests. Except in green. So, but the shirt, I think we're going to go with like a safari shirt in green.
Yeah.
Nice and cool, very breathable. M81 pants and a tan plate carrier of some sort. Helmet or no helmet, baseball cap, that kind of stuff. Possibly a boonie hat. Yeah, easily.
I mean, if you're in the swamp, you might as well go full swamp, right?
Well, that's true. I need to look at I've been to Georgia a few times, so yeah, that could fly.
So listen, let me ask you, I think we have time for one last question. Why don't you tell us about your best Milsim experience? Like, what was the thing that I don't mean like just in general, like the best Milsim, but like, what was the thing that you did at a Milsim that's like, this is the coolest thing, the most fun I've ever had?
I think that would have to go back to 2014, Operation Irene. And normally that's a Lion Claws event, of another very large Milsim game hosting company. But that year, they normally hold Irene at Fort Knox. That year, there was a conflict, and Lion Claws couldn't do it then. And they wanted to still do it on those dates. And so they shifted it to Fort Hood, Texas. And that's a current active military base with a massive mount site. They've got just different types of buildings and entire villages put together. They've got wrecked buildings that you can, they were built to be wrecked, to look like 3 walls have fallen in. All that's left is one wall. And again, many units go there to train first responders, whatnot like that. They've got a town where there's a mosque in the center of this town as well, and it's crazy. And they've got these pipes on the outside of buildings and we weren't allowed to climb up them, but it was pretty obvious they were anchored in so well that actual units would be like, okay, just scale that wall using that pipe, kind of thing. But we played there for 2 days. We played as the militia, and so we all chose to wear Hawaiian shirts. and
Nice.
whatever pants. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I brought a ICS G33 that I had, and the G33 it's meant to look like a G36, except it uses M4 mags. I brought that gun down there and just rained other heck on the other teams. And the other teams are a NATO faction, and then there's a like Delta and Charlie factions, and they're U.S. units, wearing like three-color desert or multicam, stuff like that. And the game is actually built specifically for those two teams to lose.
Okay.
It's a and I don't need to double check this, but I believe I'm correct that it's kind of a Black Hawk Down scenario, and it's in honor of the Battle of Mogadishu.
Hence the name, Op Irene. Got it.
Yeah, and so neat game, fun game, but there was the moment that I knew that I was, I'm sitting there giggling to myself and just smiling. I'm in the top floor of this 3-story tall building with this window, and I've got another window at my back, and this just nice gentle breeze is blowing in from behind me. I'm out of the sun. I'm kind of out of reach of a lot of the enemy players. The saw gunners and the snipers could get me, but I was just raining down BBs on these people. And one of the one moment that I knew that I was just having way too much fun, and this probably wasn't fair, was when I was shooting from that window down across an open area through one of these buildings built to be broken down on the corner, putting the BB through a cinder block sized murder hole, and all the buildings had them. They had these just like where they left one brick out, and those were a bit terrifying because you didn't know what was on the other side or who was in that murder hole. But I could see these guys run across the field, and I was like, I can't get them there. And then I saw them line up on the corner of the building, and I could see their legs through these little murder holes, and I shot 4 of them from an outrageous distance away through a cinder block size hole. And you could just see them just like having their hands and pull their dead rags, and then they walk off in disgust because that was like the 18th time they've tried rushing that building and getting around it. And eventually they put 2 saw gunners and a sniper on me, and eventually they shot me out. And I was like, okay, fine. I'm probably my highest average, and I don't count these things, but my, kill death ratio was pretty outrageous.
Yeah, I dare say so.
Yeah. And so I went and spawned, and I was like, okay, they haven't taken that position. So I just went back up there and just, and I probably did that for 3 hours, and just kept that entire corner. And then eventually it got boring, to tell you the truth. And I left, and I, went back downstairs with the rest of my squad that I was with, and we decided to go do something else because, I think we had connections to admin people, and there may have been somebody that said, we need to back off this a little bit because it's just not fun for the other players. And totally, I was completely happy to do that because I had my fun, and now it was time to let somebody else have their fun. So, but
yeah, if that was real warfare, different story. But for a game, it's like, all right, what else you got, right?
Yeah, exactly. At a certain point, it's not fun for you anymore either. So
yeah, totally. Well, listen, Chaz, I appreciate you making the time to chat with us today. It's always, for me, and I've said it many times, and I will keep saying it, that one of the greatest things about this Discord is all the people we've been able to meet and all the different perspectives we've been able to gain from, so far we've talked to yourself, we talked to Glick, we talked to Sam, so American Milsim players, airsoft players, I should say, but we have all kinds of other people on Discord who we've been reaching out to, and hopefully we'll be able to hear a bit more about what airsoft is like in different parts of the world, with people who speak English, obviously, because it's an English language podcast, and that's all we can do. But it's really interesting to see how different stuff is. So I really appreciate your perspective.
Have you figured out how many continents we have members on this Discord from?
I don't think we have anyone from from like Australia, which technically I mean is a continent, but we
They
have
don't
people
have
from
airsoft there.
well, yeah, well, exactly, or like New Zealand. Actually, didn't we have a guy from New Zealand at some point? Maybe can't remember. But there's definitely someone from
yeah.
the Philippines. We have
Yeah.
someone from South Africa. We have lots of people from Europe. We have people from Mexico, and I don't know if we have anyone else from so Mexico, of course, being Central America. We don't have anyone from South America. I don't think.
No, I don't think. Yeah, South America is not represented here.
But yeah. But it's funny. We were talking the other day. You're like, oh well, most of our listeners are from Canada, United States, and the UK, and it's like that's because that's where people speak English, right? Like we're as an English language podcast, like although we do have South Africa as well.
Yes, and they speak English, but I think also most European countries. I'm always shocked whenever I get to go to Europe how easy it is to speak English and get along there, to get things done. So
Yeah.
I mean, people from Finland, people from
We've got Netherlands, Poland, Belgium.
it's
Portugal,
amazing to me.
It's awesome. Yeah.
It's amazing to me. So I would love to hear somebody else's experience.
Yeah, I can't wait to have
some
those
of those
conversations.
big games that they have in Europe. So.
I want Shane to come on this podcast and talk to us about. I think it's called Burgut or Berger. I'm not sure what the pronunciation would be. I would love to hear about that. So Shane, if you're listening to this, this is your invitation. But until next week, that's all I really have for you, unless Shane decides to jump on the podcast, and I will have him on right away, guys. But no, that's all we got for you. Thank you so much, Chaz, for being here today. Thanks, guys, for listening, and we'll catch you next week.